Hi everyone, welcome to the Examine Life Daily. My name is Autumn and this is today's quote of the day. Today we have a quote by the author Anaïs Nin, and she pulls on a very Jungian concept. She says, "We don't see things as they are, we see them as we are." And I think what a beautiful way to describe a very literal reality in psychology. In the field of psych, we have a term for this. We call it projective identification. So our perception isn't neutral. It's filtered through the lens of our own experience. The way this shows up is that we attribute our intentions and our motives onto other people's behavior. Because really, with other people, what we can see is their behavior and what we can hear is their description of why they chose to do what they did, whether it was wonderful or harmful or anywhere in between. Well, the attribution we give says far more about us than it does about what the other person's motives actually were. So the way that we see this play out is, let's say, sort of on the non-beneficial side of things, in the state of gossip. Gossip being, we gather together, we talk about people who aren't there, and we say things like, he or she just think they're all that. They think they're better than. Well, we've just given attribution to our own motives of hierarchy. If we have that kind of perception, we're constantly revealing things about ourselves that we may not intend to reveal and may not even realize we're revealing. On the other hand, let's say that we're talking with somebody who shares about an achievement that somebody had, and they just give the most glowing attribution to that person. Well, that really also says far more about the interpreter than it does about the actual situation. Now, of course, we may guess correctly or incorrectly, but really what we're talking about is ourselves when we're talking about another. Now, one area that I saw this play out all the time in my work is I worked for quite a long time, nearly a decade, closely with the justice system. So I would work with people who committed violent crimes and had court-mandated therapy. I also worked with people who survived violent crimes or family members of loved ones who did not survive violent crime. This particular quote, "We don't see things as they are, we see them as we are," it would play out all the time when I was working in the field of domestic violence. So the way that this would play out with the person who committed the violent act is they had kind of nefarious motives some of the times. They had motives to be with other people and accused their partner of cheating because they had temptation. So they assumed that my partner must feel the same way about other people. I need to control that. Or they know their own motives or intentions, not even consciously. Most of this operates actually in the shadow, in the unconscious of our psyche. But there would be this sense of they're selfish, they're controlling, they're rude, they're cruel, they're abusive. That would be the belief of the person who committed the crime. And so they would justify their violent behavior by giving that attribution to the other. And again, their motive, their interpretation of the other's behavior said far more about their own motive and interpretation. So when counseling, that's what we had to work with. We had to talk about this. In 12-step, that is such a great place for bringing a sense of accountability and humility to us when we do harmful things. 12-step has a phrase that says, if you spot it, you got it. And a really good sponsor is going to be tough and gritty, and if they hear you basically not taking accountability and blaming everybody else for why you took the actions you took, they'll say, hey, if you spot it, you got it. If you find yourself judging somebody so harshly and just really believing you're right in that process, a good sponsor would say, if you spot it, you got it. It's not meant to shame you. It's meant to say self-reflect. That's where your power is. Now on the flip side, because I also worked with survivors of violent crime, so they had the opposite situation. They would often attribute kind, generous, tender, selfless motives to the person who was committing the abuse against them. And so you often saw something where folks who lacked conscience and lacked accountability ended up in relationships with folks who had excessive conscience and over responsibility. And I'm not talking about in a virtuous way or anything. I don't want to make an idea here of saints or sinners. That's not my goal. The idea is to say, if we have excessive conscience and inappropriately attribute virtuous motives to harmful behavior, that is a way that we can accidentally, inadvertently enable abusive behavior. So this is one of the ways that even being optimistic can kind of dangerously skew our perception of what's actually occurring. Now here's the thing, we can't stop seeing things as we are. That's how we're gonna interpret the world. So ways to use the wisdom of this quote to your advantage is to see, perhaps in early relationships, early friendships, early dating, to really observe with as much objectivity as possible how someone is interpreting other motives. And you'll hear it. Eventually it's gonna come out because it's what we do as we talk about people. We try to make sense of this world, and motives and intentions are unseen. We don't see things as they are, we see them as we are. May that insight help us see more clearly. May it help us see our blind spots, whether that's judging harshly and that lets us know something about some of our own motives that we may want to tend to. We all have dark motives, every single one of us. And seeing clearly is just the ultimate goal, knowing that there is a prism through which we are always going to filter reality. So the more we can see that prism, the greater we get to the truth of reality, which I just think is the best thing of all. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you got something out of this video. If you did, let us know. Comment below, hit that thumbs up button, and do subscribe. We'll see you next time, folks. Bye-bye.